Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests, it is a great honor to be with you here today and to see some familiar faces. Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Mokbil, for the invitation to be with you as the world celebrates on this day, the International Day of Human Fraternity. Thank you for hosting a conference with a very critical theme for our world, uniting for tolerance and human fraternity to combat extremism. My task here today is to address a few points about the intersection of religions with politics. From my experience, it is my understanding that religion and politics are the oldest, longest standing marriage between two streams of human consciousness and action and deliberation. It was Mahatma Gandhi who said, "Those who believe religion and politics are not connected do not understand either." Indeed, it is true that religion and politics have coexisted since time immemorial. From my home country, Egypt, one of the oldest civilizations known to humankind, that of the pharaohs, is also very symptomatic of this relationship between the religious and the political, and the very thin line that often separates them, or very frequently does not. Whereas Western Europe has undergone an age of secularism, the rest of the world, quite frankly, never did, for religion and politics were constant companions in everyday life for most peoples of the world. However, I quote Susan B. Anthony, an American Quaker who's most remembered for her work on women's suffrage, women's rights, and the abolition of slavery in 1800s in the United States. One of the things she said is, "I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I notice it always coincides with their own desires." And herein is the challenge and the dilemma of this particular dance between the religious and the political. In the region, often referred to from a very colonial standpoint as the Middle East, the middle of the East from the perspective of the United Kingdom and France, our old colonial powers, in this region, which today continues to be rife with conflict, different kinds of conflict, we see a long-standing engagement between the religious and the political. And sometimes it is hard to make that distinction and to see it. And the truth is that religion per se, all religions, actually maintain and uphold all that is good and decent and just and right. Any religions, all faiths ultimately uphold the common good. But it is when certain political actors seek to justify their existence and what it is that their own desires, their own wants, and their own interests, often at the exclusion of others, that particular manner of linking and using and abusing and instrumentalizing the religious, that is what causes harm. We see this in the Middle East in different countries. I need not name them, for today we are speaking of tolerance. But we must understand that those who manipulate the religious in the name of the political and would often abuse and instrumentalize the religious, today may be amongst the strongest threat to humankind, but not only to humankind. It is also a series of forces that threaten our very planetary welfare, if not existence. Our planet is on fire. Global warming is not a myth, it is a reality. But how is it that we can pay attention to this rising fire when we are very busy justifying the existence of very distinct interests with religious backing, sounding, justification, and moralization? The answer is we actually cannot. Let me rephrase that. We cannot save our planet unless and until we can begin to distinguish between the religions that come together for the common good and the religions that advocate and instrumentalize politics for the specific time-limited interests of the few. Ladies and gentlemen, our world has never existed without religions and faiths. That is never going to be an issue. The issue is whether these religions actually coexist and advocate for coexistence. Religions themselves do. The people who abuse them and instrumentalize them do not. In other words, the formula for peaceful coexistence today, which is tolerance plus, 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 it's not just limited to tolerance, but the formula for peaceful coexistence today, as ample historical evidence and contemporary events point, demands, I repeat that, the formula for peaceful coexistence today demands that religious leaders, religious institutions, and faith-based organizations actively collaborate with the secular and other civil society actors for the common good. It is not good enough to speak about civil society and faith-based organizations. It is imperative that we also name, and in naming, we can put right. It is civil society, including the faith-based organizations. There is no such thing as religion or faith-based entities existing outside of the realm of human life in a distinct, superior entity. There is only the reality of coexistence. Religious institutions, religious leaders, faith-based NGOs, and the multitudes of religious communities have an obligation not only to meet occasionally, for each of them to speak to the brilliant value of their own religion and their own belief. That is no longer helpful or relevant. The multiple conflicts around the world today, each claiming some kind of religious justification, point to the fact that meeting together as different religions alone is absolutely not enough. Indeed, it doesn't begin to scratch the surface. Instead, what we need to see and what secular civil society needs to demand, and what the international community needs to demand, is clear, unequivocal, consistent, and systemic examples of different religious institutions, leaders, and communities working together, serving together the common good. Ironically, COVID was a brilliant example of an opportunity to have shown how religions actively stand together and serve together. We did not see that. We did not see during COVID, for that matter, how governments could stand together and work together and save humanity. Instead, we saw a remarkable interest-based divisiveness in our global polity. And at the same time, we understand that religions are the world's most powerful motivating force. We therefore stand at an important moment in history to test the value added of our religious coexistence. It is not enough to create institutions. It is obviously not sufficient to have created decades of interfaith collaboration, because the truth is, religions have not collaborated together. At best, they have come together in meetings, but they have not put their efforts, their money, their systems, what they value most together in order to serve the common good. Instead, global pandemic and the wars we live in today, as we heard from the distinguished excellency who spoke from Yemen, what we do see is very divisive, very polarized, very interest-based, distinct interest-based ways of engaging. Some use religion, some don't. The truth is, it is not up to the secular politicians to reform the religious realms and to save our world. It is up to the religious actors in their diversity to show that they can invest together their own precious resources, human and financial, in order to save the world. It is up to the religious actors today not only to speak of peace, but to actively demonstrate how world peace is made possible through their own collaborative actions. I'm sorry to say that after nearly 30 years of serving in the interfaith and multi-religious worlds, it is often hard to find examples to uphold where religious communities and institutions have come together beyond conferences, beyond meetings, and actively invested together their most precious resources in order to realize the common good. If we do not invest our precious resources, we will not save our planet. Today, the religious communities of the world, the religious leaders and the religious institutions have a very critical obligation, responsibility, duty to indeed realize the letters of their respective faiths, which advocate for being honorable in front of our Maker. This is the moment when religions can prove that they can indeed do so. Again, not only in the halls of meetings, various meetings almost in every corner of the world, almost every day of the year, but really more in demonstrating how they can collaborate with the secular civil society, with governments, with businesses, with the international community and the United Nations, in order to actively invest in common and collective service for the common good. This is the call of our time. Again, this is the call that goes beyond tolerance to active peaceful coexistence. And this is the moment when we look to our religious leaders, religious institutions, political leaders to hold each other accountable. Our common conscience is our planet. Our planet is our common existence. It is time to see how, indeed whether, religions are ready to actively invest in serving the common good. I thank you.